Okay, get ready, because today we're going deep, like really deep. We're taking a look at Adlerian psychology, all based on the book The Courage to be Disliked. And this book, it says the world is, get this, surprisingly simple. And everyone, and they mean everyone, can find happiness.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but that's a pretty big claim, right? So let's break it all down.
It is, yeah.
And luckily, I've got an expert here to help us figure out these ideas. I mean, this could change our lives, right?
Yeah,
What do you think about all this? Because it's a bold philosophy.
it really is. You know, what I find most interesting is just how different Adlerian psychology is from, let's say, Freudian ideas. You know, the stuff many of us are kind of used to hearing about.
Right.
Freud, he was all about how past trauma shapes us. But Adler, and he actually worked with Freud initially, he went his own way, went and founded what he called individual psychology.
So you're saying it's not about blaming my childhood for the stuff I struggle with now.
Yeah, exactly. Adlerian psychology, it shifts the focus from past causes, he called it etiology, to present goals and choices. And he calls this teleology.
Okay. Think of it this way. You are the captain. You're steering your ship. You're not just a passenger getting tossed around by the waves of your past.
I like that, the captain analogy. But what about happiness? This book, The Courage to be Disliked, says everyone can find it. That just seems a little too optimistic. Like, what if I have a friend, right? And they don't leave their house. Total shut-in, really struggling with anxiety. How does this choosing happiness idea even work there?
Well, you know, Adler, he'd probably say that even in that situation, your friend is choosing that isolation.
Really?
Even if it's not like a conscious decision,
Okay.
maybe they have a need for control or a fear of being judged or even like a messed up idea of what safety is. But the big takeaway is it's a choice. Now think about yourself. Are there ways you might be, I don't know, stopping yourself from being happy? What goals are you going after without even realizing it? That's where courage comes in. The courage to like really look at those choices and maybe make some new ones. Whoa. Okay, so even my anxieties, my fears, those could be choices, not just like fate. This is a lot to think about.
It is. And it kind of leads to something even more, well, provocative, I guess. Adlerian psychology says trauma, like how we usually think of it, doesn't exist.
Wait, hold on. Trauma doesn't exist. I think some people are going to have a problem with that.
Oh, for sure. And that's kind of the whole point. Adler wants us to, question our assumptions. Remember that thing you mentioned about getting mad after spilling coffee on your new jacket?
Yeah.
Well, most psychology would say that anger, it's a natural reaction, maybe because of something that happened before. But Adler would say, no, that anger, it wasn't guaranteed. You chose to get angry. It was a way to get something, maybe attention, maybe control, maybe just to let out frustration.
So even my little coffee shop meltdown, that was a choice. You know, thinking back, there are definitely times when I used anger to, like, get what I wanted or get out of doing something I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
I guess this is making me really think about how much control I have over my emotions. More than I thought, maybe?
Yeah.
Exactly. Next time you feel that anger coming up, ask yourself, is this really out of my control? Or am I choosing it to get something? The answer might surprise you. It makes you think about free will,
Yeah.
How much do we actually control our feelings and actions?
Man, this is a serious shift in how I'm thinking about things. Okay, but what about that constant need for, I don't know, validation? Isn't wanting others to see us as good just part of being human?
Well, Adler would argue that needing that recognition all the time, it's actually a trap that leads to unhappiness. Because we become so dependent on what other people think that we lose ourselves trying to be what they want us to be. And this goes back to the idea of separation of tasks, which is like super important in Adlerian psychology.
Separation of tasks. What does that even mean?
It means focusing on what you can actually control, like your own thoughts and actions, and letting go of the stuff you can't control, like how people see you or the choices they make. For example, imagine a parent always nagging their kid to study. Whose job is it for the kid to actually study?
Well, the kids, I guess. Right. But by nagging, that parent is butting into the kid's business.
Okay.
They're creating tension, resentment, taking on something they can't actually control. And this goes for any relationship. By separating tasks, we're free from that burden of trying to control other people, and we're giving them the power to, be responsible for their own lives.
So if I'm always trying to fix my friend's problems,
Yeah.
I'm not just crossing boundaries, but I'm also, like, stopping them from actually growing.
Exactly. And you're also saying they need you, that they can't handle things on their own. This creates what Adler calls a vertical relationship, one where it's all about hierarchy, someone being above the other.
Vertical versus Horizontal relationships. I read about that somewhere. Can you explain that a bit more?
Adler thought that healthy relationships are horizontal, built on equality, mutual respect. Those vertical ones, the ones based on power imbalances and needing validation, he saw them as the root of lots of conflict. Because when we need others to constantly approve of us, we're basically putting them above us in this vertical relationship. Separating tasks helps us move to a more horizontal, equal place.
This is really making me think about how I approach relationships. But what about praise?
Yeah.
Do we all need a little encouragement sometime?
And this is where it gets interesting, because Adler thought that praise, even though it seems positive, can actually make those feelings of inferiority stronger and keep us in those vertical relationships we talked about.
Hold up. How can praise be a bad thing?
Think about it. When we praise someone, especially kids, we're usually judging them by our own standards, saying things like, "You did a good job." Well, that implies that we decide what's good, right? It puts us in a position of being superior. And this creates a situation where the person getting praised feels like they always need our approval. They're always trying to please us instead of developing their own sense of accomplishment.
Wow. Never thought about it like that. So what's the Adlerian way to do it? What do we do instead of praising? Just be tough on people.
No, not tough love, more like encouragement instead of praise. It's about recognizing effort and progress, not judging the outcome. Imagine a student who's terrified of blushing, so scared that it affects their daily life. And they go to a therapist, desperate for a cure. A traditional therapist, they might try to find the root of the fear, maybe some past trauma, but an Adlerian, they'd handle it differently.
Okay.
They might say something like, "It's amazing how your body shows your feelings so clearly. That blush just shows how much you care."
So they're not trying to get rid of the blushing.
Nope. They're encouraging the student to accept themselves, blushing and all, and to focus on what they can control, their actions and thoughts, not how their body reacts.
That's a really different way of thinking about it. I can see how that encouraging self-acceptance and focusing on what you can control would be much more powerful for that student.
Exactly. And that leads to another really important idea in Adlerian psychology. True happiness comes from feeling like you're contributing, not from chasing recognition or praise.
Wait, hold on. So it's not about getting a gold star or someone telling you how great you are.
Nope. It's about feeling valuable, like you're connected to something bigger than yourself.
That goes against everything we're taught, doesn't it? Most of us, we're wired to want that validation. So how do we even tap into this feeling of contributing? Especially if we're not, out there saving the world every day.
Even the smallest things can be a contribution. Think about someone who's bedridden, someone who can't really do much in the traditional sense. Even just them being there, being present, that's a contribution to the people around them. It changes the focus from achieving to simply being.
So just being present, being part of the human experience, that's contribution.
Exactly. It's about knowing you have value simply because you exist, because you're part of something bigger.
This is big, man. It's not about accomplishments. It's about the value of simply being. This is giving you a lot to think about.
It is.
Yeah.
And you know what? That brings us to another powerful idea from Adlerian psychology. Instead of praising, we should try gratitude. So instead of saying you are good, which is like a judgment, we can just say, "Thank you for helping me." It recognizes what they did without judging them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It really does shift things, focusing on the action itself instead of evaluating the person. It just feels more real, more empowering.
Yeah, exactly. It helps us move away from this sense of needing to be praised, that entitlement, and moves us toward appreciating what others do.
Okay, I'm really starting to get all of this. But what about goals? What we want to achieve in life. Does Adlerian psychology go against that whole set goals and make them happen thing that's everywhere these days?
It definitely challenges that idea, that conventional wisdom. See, a lot of us, we see life like it's a straight line. Get good grades, get the dream job, achieve success, and then finally be happy.
Right, it's like we're all on this treadmill that never ends.
Yeah.
Always trying to get to that someday where we'll finally be happy.
Exactly. And Adlerian psychology wants us to move away from that. Instead of being fixated on some goal way off in the future, it wants us to focus on right now. Like the here and now, there's even a word for it, energia, action in the present moment.
So are you saying goals are a bad thing?
Not necessarily, but when we get too focused on those future goals, we forget about the joy of actually getting there. All the steps along the way. Think about that violinist we were talking about before. Instead of obsessing over being like the best in the orchestra, they could find so much happiness in just getting each note right. Every piece of music, right now.
So it's more about enjoying the process, not just the end result. That makes sense.
Exactly. And it's about realizing that life isn't a straight line. It's a bunch of moments, a whole collection of nows, and each one can be meaningful and joyful.
This is deep. Instead of always looking ahead, we should be present in each moment, really savoring the experience, not just stressing about the destination. It's like mindfulness, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And this leads to something that might be a little surprising, the courage to be normal.
Hold on. Who wants to be normal?
Well, think about it. We're always told we got to be special, stand out, be the best. But that need to be better than everyone else, it's tiring. And funny enough, it can actually make us unhappy.
But isn't there some value in wanting to be the best version of yourself?
Oh, absolutely. But there's a difference between wanting to grow and needing to be better than everyone else. Adlerian psychology, it's all about accepting yourself, including all your imperfections and limits, but still trying to be better. It's about embracing the normal.
So not lowering our standards, but just letting go of that need to be extraordinary. That's freeing, actually.
Exactly. Real freedom, it comes from accepting who you are. It's about knowing that you are enough, just as you are, and then growing from that place.
This courage to be normal, I really get that. It's like, it's okay to just be me without needing to prove anything to anyone.
Exactly. And that's where you can find true happiness, not in some big accomplishment down the road, but right now. In being present, accepting yourself, and giving back to the world around you, even in small ways.
I love that. We've talked about so much freedom, responsibility, feeling connected to something bigger. But there's something I've been thinking about throughout all this. We've talked about changing how we see things, choosing happiness, living in the moment.
Hmm.
But how do we actually do that? How do we take all these ideas and make them real in our lives? Where do we even start?
That is the big question, right? And it's something we'll definitely get into in the last part of our deep dive. We're going to look at concrete things you can do, strategies you can use, real tools to actually put Adlerian psychology into practice in your everyday life.
Okay, I am ready to make this happen. But before we get to those practical tips, there's another important concept to explore. The idea of freedom.
Ah, yes. Freedom. Such a big word, but so often misunderstood. You know, most people think of freedom as something outside of us, something that depends on our circumstances. Financial freedom, freedom from oppression, things like that.
Right, like it's always just out of reach.
But Adler, he had a totally different view. He thought true freedom, it's an inner state. It's a choice we make no matter what's going on around us.
So it's not about escaping responsibilities or living a life with no rules.
Exactly. It's about knowing that even with all the limitations we have in our lives, we always have the power to choose what we think, what we do, how we react to everything around us. Remember that example we talked about earlier, the worker with the awful boss?
Yeah.
Even in that situation where they seem powerless, they still have the freedom to choose how they respond. They can fight with the boss, be resentful, or they can focus on doing their job well, keep their dignity, and find their own meaning in their work.
So even when it feels like we're stuck, we still have a choice in how we handle things. That's powerful.
It is. And this freedom, it goes hand in hand with responsibility.
Okay, responsibility. Now that's a word that makes me want to run and hide.
I get it. But in Adlerian psychology, responsibility isn't about blaming yourself or feeling guilty. It's about taking ownership of your choices, your actions, and what happens because of them.
So like taking responsibility for our own happiness, for instance.
Exactly. Instead of blaming other things for why we're unhappy, our job, our family, our past, we see that we have the power to choose how we think, feel, and act.
But what about situations where it really does feel like things outside of us are the problem? Like what if I'm stuck in a job I hate or I'm being discriminated against? Those are good reasons to be unhappy, right?
There are real challenges, for sure.
Yeah.
But even then, we still have the freedom to choose how we react. We can be a victim of our circumstances, let them define us, or we can choose to rise above them, to find meaning and purpose even when things are tough.
So it's about finding that inner strength, that resilience, to face those challenges and not let them break us.
Exactly. It's about knowing that we can't always control what happens to us, but we can always control how we respond.
Okay, I'm starting to see how freedom, responsibility, and happiness are all tied together. But how does this relate to feeling connected to the community, like we talked about before?
Remember, Adler thought the ultimate goal of life is to belong, to feel like it's okay to be here. And that feeling is really connected to our sense of freedom and responsibility.
Can you explain that connection a bit more? How do freedom and responsibility actually make us feel like we belong?
When we embrace our freedom and our responsibility, we stop seeing ourselves as victims or thinking we deserve special treatment. We start seeing ourselves as equal members of the community, contributing to the well-being of others and finding fulfillment in that contribution.
So it's not about demanding things from the community or expecting special treatment, but about actively participating and finding our place in it.
Exactly. It's about changing our mindset. Instead of asking, what can the community do for me? We ask, what can I give to the community?
That makes a lot of sense. But can you give me an example? How does this contributing to others actually play out in real life? How do we even know if we're really contributing, especially if we're not doing something, heroic or super important?
Contributing can look like a lot of things, and it doesn't have to be a big, grand gesture. Remember, Adler thought that even the smallest actions, if they're done with purpose and connection, can be a contribution.
So just little things like helping a neighbor with their groceries or volunteering at a soup kitchen, those count.
Absolutely. It's about understanding that we're all connected, that what we do, even the small stuff, can affect the people around us.
So we shift from focusing on ourselves to focusing on others, from me to we.
Exactly. And that change can really impact how happy and fulfilled we feel. Remember, Adler thought that happiness isn't a goal, it's something we create by living a life of purpose and giving back.
Wow, this is really changing how I think about happiness. It's not something we chase, it's something we build by what we do, the choices we make, and how we connect with other people.
Exactly. And that takes us to another important point. Life isn't a competition.
Wait, what? Not a competition. But isn't that how we're raised? To get the best grades, be better than others, be the best at everything?
That's the message we get a lot, yeah. But Adler believed that all this competition just creates anxiety, envy, and makes us feel like we're not good enough. It keeps us focused on needing recognition and stops us from feeling real joy and fulfillment.
So how do we get out of that competition mindset? Do we all need to become monks or something?
No, it's about changing our focus. Instead of trying to win, we focus on giving back. Instead of comparing ourselves to others, we look at our own strengths and talents and how we can use them to make a positive impact.
So it's not about being the best, but about being our best.
Exactly. And it's about knowing that our worth isn't based on how we compare to others. It's about our willingness to do something bigger than ourselves, to contribute.
I'm really starting to see the beauty in this way of thinking. It's not about beating everyone else. It's about finding our place in the world, our own way of contributing, and finding joy and fulfillment in that.
And that brings us to a concept that might seem a little strange at first, believing that our lives have this grand purpose that we need to find is actually a lie.
Wait, are you saying life has no meaning? That's pretty depressing.
Not exactly. What Adler said was that life itself doesn't come with a meaning already built in. It's up to us to make that meaning, to figure out our own purpose.
So instead of looking for some destiny that's already planned out for us, we create our own meaning through the choices we make and the things we do.
Exactly. And that's something we do constantly. Every moment, every experience, every interaction helps us create meaning.
That's pretty empowering, actually. So it's not about finding that one big thing that'll give our lives meaning. It's about seeing the meaning in everyday things, the ordinary moments.
Exactly. We can find meaning in our work, our relationships, our hobbies, our connection to nature, anything that gives us purpose and makes us feel fulfilled.
This is really making me rethink everything. It's not about finding one big purpose. It's about recognizing all the little things that can give our lives meaning. Every moment, every interaction, every experience.
And this goes back to something we talked about before, that life isn't a straight path with a destination already set. It's a bunch of moments, a collection of nows.
Right, the energia idea.
Yeah.
But how do we actually live like that, in the here and now, without being stuck in the past or worried about the future?
Adlerian psychology has some good ideas about how to live in the present moment. One of the most powerful is being grateful.
Gratitude. Yeah, we talked about that as a different way to praise people, but how does it help us live in the moment?
When we think about what we're grateful for, we stop focusing on what we don't have or what we're worried about in the future. We start noticing all the good stuff, the simple joys we experience every day.
So it's about appreciating what we have instead of thinking about what we don't have.
Exactly. And that change in how we think can really change our lives. It can make us less stressed, happier, and even healthier.
That's pretty inspiring.
Mm.
But it's not always easy, is it? Sometimes life gets tough, and it's hard to be grateful when you're going through something painful.
It's true. Gratitude can be hard when times are tough. But even then, there's always something to be grateful for. Even something basic, like the fact that we can breathe or the love of our family.
So it's about finding those little glimmers of hope, even in the darkest times.
Exactly. And that's the real power of gratitude. It's not about pretending the bad stuff isn't there. It's about choosing to focus on the good, even when it's hard.
This gives me so much hope. It's like we have this amazing power inside us to choose how we see the world, to find meaning and purpose, even when things are challenging.
And that's what Adlerian psychology is all about. Giving people the power to take control of their lives, to create their own happiness, and to live in peace with themselves and everyone around them.
This has been such an incredible journey. We started out feeling stuck in the past, always wanting approval, and now we're embracing the present, finding freedom in our choices, and experiencing the joy of giving back. You know what? I actually feel lighter, like a weight's been lifted. I'm seeing everything in a new way, and it's really exciting.
That's the amazing thing about Adlerian psychology. It's not about following a bunch of strict rules. It's about giving us the power to create our own meaning, to live with intention, and to find happiness in simply existing.
This deep dive has been amazing, and I can't thank you enough for taking us through it. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've learned that we can change, that the world is simpler than we think, and that happiness is possible for all of us. But here's the real challenge. If we can change ourselves, can we change the world? The question that Adler himself struggled with, and I think it's one we should all consider as we continue to learn about ourselves and how we can contribute to the world. Welcome back. Ready to put all this into action? Because that's what we're going to do now. Oh yeah, I'm ready. We've got the philosophy, we've laid it all out. Now I need to know, how do we actually use it? Where do we even begin?
Adlerian psychology, it's all about those small but consistent changes. Day-to-day stuff. It's not some overnight transformation, more like a gradual shift, how we see things, how we act. And one of the easiest places to start, but also one of the most powerful, is with how we talk, how we use language.
Language. That's interesting. Tell me more.
Remember when we talked about praise versus encouragement? So instead of saying someone's good, which is a judgment, we can just say thank you for what they did. Just a small change in how we talk, but it can make a big difference.
Right, acknowledging the action instead of judging the person.
Exactly. And this applies to more than just praise. The words we use, they shape how we think, and that affects how we act. Like, instead of saying, I have to go to work, try saying, I choose to go to work.
Okay.
Might seem tiny, but it shifts things. From obligation to choice, like you're in control.
Yeah, taking ownership even when it feels like you don't have a choice.
Exactly. And you can even use it when you talk about your problems instead of, I'm stuck in this dead-end job. Try, I'm working at this job while I explore other options.
Focusing on what could be, not what is.
Yeah. It's about seeing challenges as chances to grow, to learn.
Yeah.
Change how you talk about it. You change how you feel about it. And then how you deal with it.
It really makes you think about how powerful words are. Like, we can literally shape our reality with what we say.
And that power, it's not just inside our heads, it's how we talk to other people. Remember those horizontal relationships we talked about? Adlerian psychology is big on respectful communication, even when things get tough, even with the difficult people.
So you're saying we should stand up for ourselves, but in a way that respects the other person's view.
Exactly. Finding that balance between being assertive and understanding where they're coming from, even when they're being totally unreasonable.
Thinking back to that boss example, how do we actually communicate like that, assertively, without getting fired?
Well, it starts with knowing you have the right to be treated with respect, no matter what your job title is. And it's about saying what you need, what your boundaries are, clearly and calmly. No need to get aggressive or defensive.
So, like, saying, I understand you're frustrated, but I need you to talk to me respectfully.
Right. You're recognizing how they feel, but also setting that clear boundary. It's not about winning a fight. It's about keeping your dignity and making the whole interaction more respectful.
This is great. I'm getting some real tools to use in those tough conversations.
That's what Adlerian psychology is about. Giving you tools for a happier life. Understanding yourself better, having better relationships, finding your place in the world.
This has been an amazing journey. We started feeling trapped by the past, always needing validation, and now we're here, embracing the present, seeing the freedom we have in our choices, feeling the joy of giving back. I feel lighter, like some weight's been lifted. I'm seeing things differently, and it's pretty exciting.
That's the beauty of it. It's not about strict rules. It's about you creating your own meaning, living with purpose, and finding happiness just in being alive.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening, and I can't thank you enough for guiding us through it. To all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this exploration of Adlerian psychology. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep striving for a life filled with courage, freedom, and happiness.